So most of them we can go through pretty quickly. We'll start with 340 Superintendent. The only change is a reference to Illinois Administrative Code at the end, and some of the school code references. The policy itself, there's no change.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moore. Is everyone okay with these changes going forward? Are there any questions first? No? Okay, is everyone comfortable with these going forward on the consent agenda?
Yes, I am.
Yes. Okay, it looks like everybody is shaking their head or saying yes to consent agenda for item A.
That was only the first one.
I'm sorry, the
Yeah.
first one. Okay, I'm
But-
sorry, I thought I was like, wait, did you go over all
Well,
of them?
I could.
Yes,
I can.
roll on through.
480 Accounting and Audit, same thing, legal references and footnotes only. That's on page 6.
Are we going to go through each one separately and say yes for consent? Or do you want to go through them and then if there's anyone to pull?
Let's go through all of them and then we can ask questions
Okay.
and then,
All right. 490, which starts on page 8, is one of those that the concept has always existed, but they're now making explicit the difference between student activity funds, such as the money a club would collect and put in the account, versus a fiduciary fund, which is money that the board is directed to oversee but does not own. I don't have an example of what that would be, but in practice, there's no change here.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at board book and I see the next one as being accounting and audits. Is that where you are?
I've gone to the next one after that already.
Okay,
Yep.
all right, thank you.
Yep, page 8. Do you have page numbers on yours? I'm not sure. Do you see? No? Okay. It was 490 was the policy number. Any questions on that?
Do we have a paper copy?
Moving along then, 620 school year calendar and day, again, is just legal references changed, no change to the policy itself. Six 300 is graduation requirements. This is writing in changes in the case of a pandemic declaration that the state may change the graduation requirements and that we would choose to follow along. You'll recall in the fall, we decided not to change our graduation requirements for last year.
So if I understand you correctly, this would change the policy such that we would say that we would follow the state's guidelines.
It would say that the state may change the guidelines and then we would have a decision of whether to follow along or not.
So it does not preclude us from going against the state's change.
No.
Okay.
As long as we exceed them at whatever the
Yeah.
minimum requirement is.
Our requirements have been considerably higher than those of the minimum for as long as I know. 6310 high school credit for non-district experiences, course substitution, re-entering students. Under substitutions for required courses, there has been a reference to a registered apprenticeship program in the prior policy for a long time. They are now laying out what is a registered apprenticeship program. This does not require that we have an apprenticeship program, but it requires that if we have one, these are the rules we follow. This again comes right out of school code. Any questions? Okay, 6320, another one where it's just changing the legal references at the end, no changes to the policy. 6340, student testing. This is one of those that press likes to take what already exists and write it in a different way that doesn't change the message at all. So now they are saying the district administers to students all standardized assessments required by the state board instead of administers the state assessment system to all students. Same message, different words. A couple years ago, we changed that to take out the names of the assessments. Which made sense because the names have changed a number of times in the last few years. 730 is one of our local policies. So this change is not from press. This is coming from administration. This is our student assignment inter-district transfer. We, many years ago, adopted some exceptions to the policy that were all time-bound. So under elementary, we had a policy that was effective through the end of the 17-18 school year. And then a new policy, it says, takes effect in the 18-19 school year. Well, since the 17-18 school year is long past, we don't really need language referring to something that happened then anymore. So that's the first change. Same thing under middle school, something that could happen in 17-18 and 18-19. Those are obviously expired. And then on page 19, the second page of this policy, there was a exception for East High School, Anderson planning areas, the listed planning areas, when we changed the boundary for high school, which was prior to the wholesale change for elementary and middle. We moved the Anderson planning area from east to north, but allowed a carve out for people who were still in 6th grade at the time. Well, all of those students are now in high school. So the carve out is no longer needed because it doesn't apply to anybody. Those are the only changes. $740, non-public school students and so on. This just reflects the fact that policy 730, the one you just saw, is called student assignment and inter-district transfer. At some point in the past, the title of that policy changed, but it was never changed in the reference in this policy, so it changes the title of the reference. Seven 100 health, eye, and dental exams. We used to call a registered advanced practice nurse. Now it's called an advanced practice registered nurse. So again, no meaningful change. There was in number 3 a section that took effect with 17-18, just like in the last policy. That's already happened. And then in terms of holding report cards during disaster declaration, we're not going to hold report cards, but that really hasn't been our practice anyway.
I do have a question about the social emotional screening. Is that something a pediatrician does when the student is there and the forms say that and fill out? This is not a separate requirement that parents have to go to a.
My understanding is it's just part of the physical now.
Okay, that's,
It is, there's a section on the
Okay.
form.
thank you.
7140 search and seizure, again, changing just the legal references at the end. No change to the policy. And then 7300 extracurricular activities is really the same as one of the prior ones. We're calling it an advanced practice registered nurse now. Instead of an APN, it's an APRN.
Sorry, can we go back one?
Sure.
Search and seizure, if there's no changes, why is it on here?
Because the legal references at the end have changed.
Okay. Gotcha, thanks.
So I would recommend that we send all those for consent since there didn't seem to be any thing of terrible importance.
All right, now, does anyone have any questions left over? No? Consent? Okay, I'm getting everyone's head shaking. All right, great, consent
Yes.
then, for item A.
Thank you.
Okay, so that brings us on to motion procedures at meetings. So this one, this second item for discussion, it's just been a little over time that I noticed we were maybe not quite sure how to put forward motions or maybe when and what the language might be. So policy seems to be the perfect place to discuss some of those parliamentary procedures. And so I think we could all use a bit of a refresher here and there. So Mr. Moore, if you would lead us through some understanding of the types of motions and what the procedures are for those motions.
And Dr. Pearson may take part of this at least. You at some point, looks like, reviewed this on June 12th of 2019 board agreements. We provided you a copy on your table. It's just a reminder that to add items to the agenda, you are, I believe, supposed to talk with the superintendent and or the president, and that's how we add things to agenda at any level. For bringing back prior topics of discussion, in Robert's rules, there's a motion called the motion to reconsider, but that is only in order on the day of a vote. So under Robert's rules, you can't move to reconsider something that was approved at a prior meeting unless it's a new meeting on the same date. But that's pretty rare for us that we would have two action item meetings on the same day. Beyond that, it's really just board practice to put items on an agenda.
Does anyone have any further questions about bringing motions or types of motions?
Could the board agreements be recirculated via soft copy to the member board?
Absolutely. Can you get that done? Thank you.
What would the process be to amend or change these board agreements?
So those are typically discussed at a board retreat. Usually when a new board is seated, is when you usually go over those board agreements, and with the facilitator from ISB, I think that's how we've generated them in the past. It's good because you can kind of unpack, what the reason is behind the ones that you've identified and why they're written the way that they are. So that's typically when it's been handled. But I mean, I guess at any point the board could choose to vary that process. It just often requires a bigger conversation. So that's when they've normally done that.
Dr. Pearson, can you check and see if a third-party mediator is required for that discussion?
It's only required if you're going to do something in closed session. So if we do an open session discussion, you don't need a mediator.
The only comment I have on this is that I think that these things apply based upon the notion that things were passed without procedural deficits. That if there were procedural deficits, then reconsideration probably doesn't have to follow these rules. So.
The operation of the board in terms of motion is really a decision of the board. You've agreed to follow Robert's rules, which doesn't prohibit you from putting anything on an agenda at any time. That would be a decision of the board itself.
Mr. Moore, can you just clarify, in parliamentary procedure, in any governing board, have they ever strayed outside the lines of parliamentary procedure?
Um, well, I suppose it depends on what you mean by straight outside the line. So there's a premise under parliamentary procedure that the ruling of the chair is the ruling of the chair, which would usually be the president. So let me give you an example from Congress, because we're all familiar with Congress. So, and I'll use the filibuster as an example. So in the Senate, currently requires a 60 vote limit to invoke cloture on anything, well, on most things. A few years ago, the Senate changed that rule for certain votes. We'll use cabinet secretaries as the example. So that was changed. The way it was changed was by appealing to the chair to make a ruling on a decision. The parliamentarian had who is not a member of the body, made a ruling that you needed a 60 vote cloture motion on a cabinet secretary. And then the chair overruled that by majority vote. So through majority vote of the body, you can overrule your own rules. So yes, it happens. I guess I'm speculating and saying it doesn't happen very often.
Are there any other questions that anyone might have in regards to motions? No?
I just want to come back to this idea of typical. And if I heard you rightly, if the board was to decide to change any of the rules associated with the agreement that's this agreement, we simply could, by majority vote, have a motion and a board meeting and make that change. Do I have that about right?
Yes.
Okay.
Is that all? Anyone else? Okay, looks like we're about done with questions. Okay, so let's move on to future agenda items. April 26th at 5 o'clock is the next policy meeting. And that will be, topic will be student conduct for the discipline handbook. It's an addendum that will be going into the discipline handbook. Additionally, I had asked that additional ways for citizens' comments to be looked at. And in June, that's going to be coming up on policy. Okay, it is. And I can't see the time here, so let's go with 5:20. We will adjourn policy committee. Okay.
Are you gonna put this here? Okay. Well, that's what they say. There's overwhelm.
Okay, everyone, let's go ahead and get started. It is Monday, March 22nd, 5:30 PM for the Business Services Committee. We will start out with citizen comments, and we do have a citizen comment. So first, by introduction, the school code provides for a public comment period at each board meeting, subject to reasonable constraints. The practice of this board is to limit public comment to 3 minutes per speaker to a total of 30 minutes at the beginning of the meeting. Speakers addressing the board are expected to maintain a reasonable level of civility. Also, personnel matters are sensitive and confidential. Comments regarding individuals should be respectful. Insults and defamatory remarks have no place in this setting. The board will terminate public comment if speakers cannot adhere to these guidelines. Please identify yourself at the beginning of your remarks. And we have Kathleen Granzik-Huber.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kathleen Granzik-Huber. I am a North and Redling parent and also the administrator for the Reopened D303 Schools Group with over almost 1,000 D303 families. I'm here today to advocate for a group of parents that has been fairly silent in both our group and at board meetings, the kindergarten parents. There's been a lot of discussion about older students' needs during the pandemic and post-school changes, but we want to ensure that our littlest learners' voices and those of their parents are being clearly heard. Kindergartners are in school for just over 2 hours, much less than the normal pre-COVID schedule. They are masked, many sitting on yoga mats versus desks, far away from classmates, and can only play with a small box of toys by themselves. They cannot eat their snack and go outside and play like first graders do. Just let that sink in. They cannot, it's really tough for middle school and high school to read critical social cues. We were just talking about this today. But for a 5 and 6-year-old to read social cues when you're masked up, it's even more challenging. The lack of closeness of classmates and teachers has created confusion, frustration, sadness, isolation for these kids. Additionally, many early childhood psychologists say that social emotional skills far exceed the priority level than academic skills for this age group, and that when large gaps occur, it can have a hugely negative impact on all aspects of learning, academic, and career success. So in addition to that said, what we know right now, number one, COVID. The COVID rates in our elementary schools are low. In fact, they're almost non-existent. Right now, we have 5 cases in 12 buildings. That's 9 buildings that have 0 cases, 0.1% COVID rate. So I won't belabor that. Everybody's been looking at the dashboard and they know there's pretty much 0 cases a lot. It's a huge compliment to teachers and staff and students that have been executing properly the safety measures and keeping each other safe. Number 2, the distance rules of the game have changed. So IDPH, along with the IDPH and ISBA changes, our district is making much needed distance and time changes to most other grades. So what we're asking is that you also consider making some small changes to the kindergarten students also after spring break. One should be hopefully very easy. Review the classroom distance guidelines and make physical changes to the classroom, desks, mats, etc., to create a closer feeling of community for these students. And then number 2, an additional 30 to 60 minutes of social time, specifically interactive with other students and at a closer distance. The kindergarten parents believe strongly that even 15 minutes of additional social and emotional time would positively impact their children for the final 60 days of kindergarten. I'm hoping the board and administration believes they can do better than 15 minutes. Lastly, I can't think of a better compliment to give your first grade educators than to deliver to them a kindergarten class in August that is 100% ready to learn and grow with these improved changes. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you very much. That concludes citizen comments, and we'll move to the superintendent's report, Dr. Pearson.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you, Ms. Fairgrieve. I wanted to just begin tonight by reporting that we have completed our survey of families related to returning to in-person learning. All of our hybrid families received a survey from the district last week. We asked them to complete that by Friday, although we did leave the window open through the weekend just in case there were some people who had not been able to complete it. We're still short about 800 students that haven't responded yet. So we've been calling and sending additional emails to try to get a final response. But so far, we've had 3,828 respond to the survey. Of those that have responded, 3,717 of them have said they would like to remain in person. 111 of them decided to switch to remote. Which is about 2.9% of the respondents. The ones that are switching to remote, of the two levels, 100 of those families are high school students and 11 are middle school. So it's mostly at the high school level where they are doing that. So we are moving ahead with our plans to return to every day, 5 days a week in-person learning beginning April the 5th. We'll be sending out a communication to families late tomorrow or early Wednesday with just some additional details related to the schedule, transportation, and food service. There's some small changes to all three of those, just due to the fact that now students will be attending every day instead of every other day. So that information will be provided so that families are ready after spring break to come back on the new schedule. Just as a reminder, at all three levels, we're continuing the same bell schedule that we're currently following. And at the elementary level, there's not any change because of the fact that we have been offering 5 days a week in-person learning at elementary since the beginning of the school year. I also wanted to just talk a little bit about our high school celebration committee. Approximately a little over a month ago, now it's been almost actually 2 months, the high school principals formed a committee that has 12 parents and 12 students from the 2 high schools and 6 staff members that are jointly meeting and have been jointly meeting to look at ways that we can recognize and celebrate our students during the spring semester. They focus first on seniors and have put out actually quite a list of opportunities coming forward. They're very excited. They have one more meeting on Thursday before they're going to be sharing those events with the students. There's been several rounds of surveys of students. They've identified what the priorities were for students, what was most important to them. And I think the last survey had 17 different events that they had brainstormed, and they've identified, I think, 5 or 6 that they're going to be moving forward. I'm actually really impressed with the work that the team has done, and I wanted to just take a moment just to say publicly or express appreciation to the parents and the students that have been serving on the committee. You know, it's been a challenging year for all of us as we've tried to plan not only school, but also the kinds of extracurricular opportunities that we provide to our students and families. And this team has tried to take a very challenging situation and plan some exciting opportunities for our students that will be coming forward. So I wanted to just mention tonight that we had those teams continuing to work, and I wanted to have an opportunity to express appreciation. We also have an appointment this week at NIU to look at the stadium and make some preliminary plans for graduation. We'll continue to work with that, and we have, of course, previously announced that graduation will be on May 24th at NIU. I also just wanted to mention, you know, I think I've said before, every Monday we have a call with the health department, and we are very excited about moving forward. We are doing well in our schools related to the pandemic and the challenges of COVID-19. But at the same time, I just want to mention that our ability to increase in-person learning is tied to us following our mitigation strategies at school, and also with families and students following those same mitigation strategies in our community. Today, I became aware of that there's a sports team in one of our communities that's having an outbreak. And it's specifically because they weren't following some of those mitigation strategies. And I know people are tired, and I know that everyone is ready for this to all be over. but we also have to just continue to be vigilant as we roll out vaccines and as we continue to monitor and control the spread of COVID in our schools and communities. So I would just encourage our families and our students to continue to try to follow those strategies at school and in the community, because I don't want us to find ourselves in a situation where we have to take a step backwards because we have an outbreak. So I would just encourage folks to continue to follow that. And that completes the superintendent's update.
So Dr. Pearson, just to clarify, the sports team outbreak that you mentioned, that is not a St. Charles High School team?
Correct, it's not. It's in the county.
Okay, thank you.
It is a school team though.
Okay.
Dr. Pearson, will the board be at graduation? Is it looking like we will be part of the graduation ceremony?
Yes, we are planning a full ceremony. The only restriction that we would have is the capacity of the stadium. And as you know, even last week, we got an update with some changes from the governor's office related to events, and it looks like there's going to be another increase in capacity. So we'll know closer to the event date exactly how many guests each graduate will be able to invite.
Can I just clarify that there was an email communication that went out to parents specifying number of guests, so parents can expect another clarification email to go out, correct?
Yeah. So originally they told us 2, and then they said probably 4, and now it looks like that's going to be increased even more. So they could plan for us being able to invite more.
Okay,
Correct.
just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments for Dr. Pearson? Okay. So moving to items under number 4, Mid-Valley Financial Report.
Yes, Mid-Valley is reporting that both revenue and expenditures are trending behind the prior year at the same time, and that currently there are no areas of concern within their revenue or expenditure budget.
Okay. Thank you for that. Next standing agenda item, our D303 financial report for February.
Okay. Revenue as a percent of budget is trending ahead of the prior year, while expenditures are trending very close to the prior year. Please note that the non-capital outlay expenditures are trending higher than anticipated, and this is due to COVID-related expenditures such as auto flush toilets and touchless faucets that go into that category. The total of those expenditures is just under $500,000. There are no other areas of concern within the revenue and expenditure budget at this time. Please also know that the February investment report is attached for your review.
Okay, any questions related to the district budget review? Okay, moving on to the next item, item 4C, the COVID-19 financial impact summary.
Yes, good evening. We have a updated report for you in your packet behind the summary sheet, which is about $300,000 of expenditures over the past month that came through. When we net out some of the offsetting revenue, the impact was $287,514.32. Overall, still looking very strong. I did want to give you an update that was also included in Dr. Pearson's superintendent's update on Friday, which is we've got several grants that are kind of still out there as offsetting revenue. You know that the CARES Act, you can see in the comment section that the CARES Act is offsetting some of this. We've also got the FEMA grant that has been submitted and we're waiting response on. That's about $380,000. We're hoping to get a response back on that in the next month or so. And then the ESSER funds, the application was released. This is the funding that came out in December. The application was just released about 3 or 4 weeks ago. We have now submitted that application, and many of the things on this list apply and will be charged off to that grant. So the next month you see this, you'll see an offset from the ESSER grant in some of these categories as well. And then there is the ARP, American Relief Plan, that has been announced and tentatively talked about, but we don't anticipate that hitting this fiscal year, would hit next fiscal year. So that's the plan. So that's it for the update on COVID-19 financial impact, unless there's any questions.
Any questions?
We did make a note in our pre-meeting that there were some adjustments that won't show up until the April report for the purchases that we made for moving from 6 to 3 feet. So that'll be in our April report. That's for your information on the general meeting.
Correct, thank you.
And that's related to, if you recall, the desk purchases that were made. So it's approximately 205,000 still.
That's right, yep, and a
Okay.
portion of that will get offset from the ESSER funds as well. So we'll have that information for you next month.
Okay, thank you. The next item we have is item 4D is the health insurance update. Mr. Moore.
All right, good evening again. Every year or so, I bring just an update on our health insurance plan. So as a reminder, we are a self-funded plan. That means that we collect premiums from both the board and the employees, and those are what is used to pay the claims. So our increase each year is really based upon our experience, more so than experience elsewhere. So just as an overview, on average, we're an 85% employer, 15% employee contributory system. If you choose single coverage, it's less to the employee. And if you choose full family on the HMO, it's a little more. We have 3 different plans. We have a traditional PPO. That's the one that's subscribed to the most. We have a high deductible PPO, which is the same network, just with higher deductibles and an attached health savings account. That one is the lowest subscribed. And then in the middle is HMO Illinois, Blue Cross's fully insured HMO plan. And as you can see, there's the breakdowns. We have 4 tiers, just one for single plus their children, single plus spouse, and family tiers. And just for reference, we do have a spousal rule that if your spouse is eligible for coverage at his or her employer, they must take it to be on ours as secondary. If they're not eligible, then we cover primary. We have a health insurance committee, which is made up of representatives from the 3 unions, plus the non-union group, plus administration. And our consultant is Tristan DiTomaso from Cunningham and Butler. We have been with not C&B, but with Tristan and her firm as they've been merged into newer groups for at least 20 years. We did an RFP 6 or 7 years ago to put it out to market, and they won that bid. At that time, it wasn't the low bid, but it was the one we chose as highest quality. You can look at this slide on your own. This is just the age of all of the members in the plan. You can see that the PPO tends to be a slightly older group than the HMO, but not significantly. Medical claims. We're on a calendar year basis. Many school districts use a school fiscal year basis, but we do calendar year. So our open enrollment is in November. New benefits take effect January 1st. Claims on the PPO increased in 2020 by about 7%, but HMO actually went down very slightly, just 0.1%. Dental, we have a dental plan. It also is self-funded. It's through MetLife. Dental claims increased from 19 to 20 by 15%, but then our vision plan, which is bundled with the medical plan through VSP, decreased by 7%. This is one of those areas that we saw a very interesting impact from COVID. If you look at the claims from April, they were the smallest by far they've ever been. So the vision claim in a typical month, there might be about 10,000 in claims. In April, it was about $2,000. So in April, it would, and then it has come back over the course of the year. And I think I said that wrong. Dental claims decreased over the year. They did not increase. So the slide is right. I think I said it wrong in there. Sorry. Large claims. So in any medical plan, everybody's covered, but the cost driver is often your large claims. So we're defining a large claim as $50,000 in paid claims in a calendar year. So that's not the claimed amount, of course, under any insurance plan, you have discounted costs. So this is what the plan actually paid on the claim, not what was billed by the hospital or other outfit. In 2020, we had 57 large claims on the PPO. Prior year, we had 48. Prior year, we had 55. So it was slightly higher, but not at a concerning level. Of those, 37 were employees, 11 were spouses, and 9 were dependents. Most were almost all in the PPO. Of those, 7 of them are no longer in the plan. 54 remain active, 1 is on COBRA, and 2 are in the retirement plan. 8 of them were repeats, and 18 were repeat claims from 18 and 19. What was a little interesting is that although the number of high cost claimants went up by 9 from 19 to 20, the cost per claimant actually went down. So that could be a sign that the significance level of each one was a little bit less. But then the bottom right graph, the total cost of the large claimants did increase. On the HMO, there were 9 high claimants this year compared to 12 in the prior year. Again, the average cost per large claimant went down. So when we renewed for 2021, the things that we considered in setting the rates for the new year were the inevitable medical inflation. Whatever it costs this year always costs more next year in medicine. The inflation referred to us by Blue Cross was 6% for the PPO and 5% for the HMO. The fees to Blue Cross increased, the stop loss. So because we're self-funded, we are responsible for our own claims, but we then buy insurance called stop loss that is, we pay up to the stop loss limit, which is $210,000 per year per individual. And then any amount beyond that, the stop loss carrier covers it. Blue Cross is our stop loss carrier, but we do market that every year. So in essence, it's insurance for the insurance plan. We also have an aggregate stop loss so that if our total outlay is more than 125% increase from the prior year, then the aggregate stop loss covers the rest. We've never gotten close to that. So the stop loss fees went up. Blue Cross, because this was the year that we marketed the whole health plan, they came in with a credit and remained competitive. VSP, the vision plan, we did the year before, so we have them on a rate guarantee through 12/31 of 22. Similarly, the dental plan, we're on a fee guarantee through 12/31 of 22. In the forecasting, Cottingham and Butler did adjust for what they expect as the impact of COVID-19. What I think the forecasters struggle with is the care that was deferred during COVID. First, will it happen? So some things will just never happen. If you missed your dental appointment, you're probably not making it up because you've already waited another 6 months. How would you make it up? If you missed an elective surgery, you might make it up, or you may just never do it. If you never do it, clearly that's a savings to the plan. On the other side, if you skipped your preventative care, that may show up in some time down the line as surgery, which is expensive. So there are lots of factors that they're using in trying to figure out what was the impact of shutting down healthcare for non-emergency things for a number of months. I won't read this whole page to you, but the summary is that for calendar year 19, we had about a 9.5% rate increase, but didn't change the plan. For 2020, we had a 5.7% rate increase and made some pretty significant changes to the plan. And those really were starting to show up for the 21 renewal, where we only went a 3% rate increase. We were, as a committee, pretty pleased to hold the rate increase to only 3% for this year, less than medical inflation of 6%. What questions can I try to answer?
Can I just add one thing really quickly? This is a really fantastic group that represent us in the insurance committee. Our 3 unions are all represented. Mr. Moore does a fantastic job of coordinating. We've had great support from our consultants. There hasn't been a year that I've been here that we haven't had to have some difficult discussions, and it's always been handled exceptionally well to try to do things for the betterment of the district and for the employees that work here. So it's been a really great group to work for. So I just want to add that.
Chapman, can you just give us the impact and what this will be for next year's assumption for next year's budget?
Yeah, so in the 5-year projection, we were holding to that 6% number. And I'd mentioned that that's a conservative number. As we're preparing right now, draft 1 of the budget, we're going to back that down to a 4% assumption when we come into draft 1. So that's around a $350,000 impact 1% is about $175,000. So we feel good about that number. Feel like we'll be in a good position. And so, as Mr. Moore said, this is a plan that straddles 2 years, and we're coming off of a very low increase, and we expect this next one to be, slightly above that, but moderate. So, and I would also add one of the things that we have is we track our reserve, because we are self-funded. If we do experience an exceptionally bad year, which it happens, once every decade or so, you'll get a really bad claims year. We do have the ability to cover those losses without having to dip into any funds that impact instruction. So we have a reserve meant for that. We carry what's a 200% of IBNR, incurred but not reported, which is way more than we need. It means basically when the claim gets made, if we were to stop offering insurance, there's always a run out for a year or so. So we carry about 2 years worth just to be safe.
And that would be before the stop loss.
Oh yeah,
component
that
comes in.
totally different from that. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions or comments linked to this piece? This was informational, so thank you very much for that. And then moving on to our next item, I think Mr. Moore, you'll also be talking about the new supplemental savings plan offered by Teachers Retirement System.
Yes, there is no presentation for this one. And I will start with a small story. So about a month ago, TRS sent out to superintendents statewide a message that says your board shall adopt this resolution by the end of March. There was virtually no explanation of what the resolution was or why you would adopt it, other than you shall. There was necessary pushback from schools, district, statewide. And finally, some more information came. In one of the pension bills, at least a couple years ago, the legislature wrote into law that TRS would offer a 457 plan as a offering through TRS, but not as part of the pension itself. A 457 is sort of like a 401k, but for public employers. We also have a 403b plan, which is more like a 401k for public employers. We are required under TRS regulation to offer this supplemental savings plan, although we don't know what the details are at this point, and we don't have communication materials or anything because the plan itself does not yet exist. So there's nothing to sign up for at this point. What I do know is that it will be optional for employees to choose to participate or not. It will run in parallel to our existing 403b and 457 programs. So we're not going to stop offering the extra retirement savings that we've offered for many, many years. Will just be another choice. It won't cost us, according to TRS, it won't cost us anything. It will just be part of the state's plan. So why would somebody choose this? I can speculate and think, well, the management fees might be less than using our plan. I don't know that, but it's possible. If you like the idea of the state of Illinois being the custodian of your retirement savings outside your pension, you might want to choose this. And it's possible that the funds that they offer will be better than what we can offer. But again, there's really no way to know it right now. TRS have provided us with a model resolution, which we're asking you to approve because they tell us we have to, and the plan document itself, but none of the details yet. It's not starting now. I suppose it could start in July with the new fiscal year, but I haven't seen that published anywhere. So we're asking you to pass this resolution, which authorizes us as an employer to be a part of this plan, but does not require that anyone actually use it.
So just to clarify, by passing the resolution, there would not be any costs passed to the district in terms of administrative fees or anything like that. That will be borne by the state or TIRA.
That is what they have put in their published materials, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And what if we vote it down or choose not to do? What happens to the district or our employee?
Well, our employees won't be able to participate. And the way I read the regulation is that TRS members by state law have to be able to participate. And the way TRS is interpreting that under the Internal Revenue Code is that every employer, because TRS is not an employer, we are, in order for our people to reach the plan that they're supposed to be able to get to, they have to do it through us. I think it would be like some other things that the state says by law you shall do, and we just do because that's what the law says.
So what'll happen in terms of next steps then, this would go on action at the next board meeting in the form of a resolution to be voted on. Any other questions or comments on this item?
I guess I'm just confused. I'm always confused when there's a mandate comes down, but then they tell us you have to vote for it. In other words, they're saying you must give your imprimatur to this thing that we're not even telling you what it is, but you've got to do it. And then you have to say that you want to participate when perhaps you might not want to.
I can't counter any of what you said, other than they aren't at all saying any employee needs to join the plan. They're just saying that they have the ability to do so.
Well, and I think it's possible that there are districts that aren't offering employee supplemental plans, particularly tier 2 employees. I don't know who that would be, but so I think it's an attempt on their part to ensure that employees have access to a supplemental plan. You know, tier 2 is nothing like tier 1 is, and I think that was probably the rationale behind the requirement. But again, we're ahead of the process, I think, in the approval prior to understanding what the logistics are.
It just doesn't make sense. I'm sorry. It just doesn't make sense to me that they're asking us to, they're holding a gun to your head and saying you must vote for this. Doesn't make any sense to me. So
Has IASB landed or recommended, or this is law, right? Is that what I mean?
The law is on TRS to offer the plan.
Okay.
And their interpretation of revenue code is that they can't offer the plan themselves because they're not an employer, and only an employer can offer a 457 plan, therefore the connection to the local districts who actually are the employer.
And do you know why it has to be done at the end of March?
Well, they backed off that a little bit, but no, I don't.
I mean,
we're not bringing it to you till April.
right,
But,
right. But I mean, there's a deadline when there's no program yet. Okay.
I don't know. And it didn't say in their communications why the deadline.
Okay.
I'm just going to point out that I'm not, this is, as has been the case with other things, I'm not opposing nor supporting this plan. I don't know what it is. I just think you really can't ask people to vote on things when you don't know when they don't know what they are. So this is yet again one of those things where I think people need to start contacting the legislative levels above this board.
Once we have specific information, I'll be happy to bring it back and give you more information when we get it.
I think it's also, again, just to reiterate, this is no cost to the district. So definitely appreciate all of the various comments, but I just want to reiterate, while the process is certainly not ideal or acceptable, I would say, there is no cost to the district, administrative or otherwise.
I appreciate that point. Has there been any other situation where a TRS-oriented mandate has come down like this, and then we've later had to bear the burden of some hidden cost?
No, I'm looking at Dr. Chapman. We're both shaking our heads. No, not that we recall.
I would just hate for there to be a budget surprise later that we can't yet anticipate because the program is so either opaque or not in existence.
Yeah, I really think it comes down to what Dr. Pearson said. I mean, even though we do even offer it, I think it's the way for TRS to comply, knowing that each employer could at any point in time add or remove, technically. I mean, there's nothing that requires us to offer a 457 that we do. It's an optional program. So it's kind of TRS's way of covering themselves to make sure that every district knows that it's expected.
It's kind of an odd question. Is there a cost to a 457 plan? Not being in education.
You mean from the district?
Yeah, from the district.
No, we don't pay anything. There's administrative fees that are charged to the employee that participates.
Any other questions, comments? Okay. Okay, next item 4F relates to the Crystal Loss land cash refund request.
Yeah, similar to a category of things we don't see very often. We had a developer pay their land cash fee a couple years ago on this Crystal Lofts project at Indiana and 13th Avenue, which is now not going to go forward. So they voided the building permit. I asked for, along with the Park District, asked for a copy of a letter from the city that would memorialize the situation and give reassurance to you as a board that should that property get developed in the future, that land cash money would be owed. So given that we have that assurance, I would recommend go ahead and offer that refund to the developer because they did not move forward in the process. So that would be $21,460. You know, it's out of a different year's budget, but we have the budget to do that this year, so it's not going to hurt us. Any questions on that one?
Okay. So that one would move to consent. Okay. Next item is item 4G, amendment to intergovernmental agreement between St. Charles Park District and District 303.
Yes, and as most of you know that we have many agreements with our friends at the Park District. This is for the turf agreement just outside to the west of us here. And in that agreement, after the first 2 years, it called for looking at the actual usage of that, the Park District's usage of that field to dictate the revenue. But with a COVID year, we really didn't have any usage to go off of. So we're recommending we extend that back and bump that back a year, leave it at the flat $32,000 that we were at prior to this, and move forward. Otherwise, no changes to the agreement. Some minor language changes, but nothing that's significant. So. Any questions on that?
I think everybody's okay with that one.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Next is really a discussion around all-day kindergarten. Start with Ms. Geyer.
Good evening. The following presentation is intended to provide an update on the district's fee-based all-day kindergarten program and to provide information on the financial impact of eliminating the fee moving forward. This presentation is aligned to the strategic commitments of innovative learning and responsible stewardship, as well as the school board commitments of providing learning opportunities responsive to the whole child and allocating community resources responsibly. It's also aligned with Policy 6-10, District Educational Philosophy and Objectives to provide an opportunity for each student to develop to his or her maximal potential, fostering their self-discovery, self-awareness, and self-discipline, and with Policy 7:10 to provide equal educational opportunities. So I want to start by giving you a current kindergarten, some background, non-COVID year. Parents have the option of an all-day kindergarten or half-day kindergarten program for their child. The registration fee for all-day kindergarten is slightly higher than that for half-day. The district's kindergarten curriculum is a rigorous academic experience. All kindergarten students receive the core curriculum in both the half-day and the all-day kindergarten program. Those who attend the all-day program engage in more in-depth learning experiences of the core curriculum, an additional time to explore, create, play to learn, solve problems, and interact with peers during the additional time they are in class. Our all-day kindergarten is a fee-based program. Currently, we charge $2,025 for the year. The fee offsets the costs incurred by the additional half-day of instruction, including personnel costs. If a family qualifies for free and reduced, their ADK program fee is significantly reduced to $90 a year. District 303 has seen a steady increase in enrollments for all-day kindergarten since its inception in 2009. Over the last 3 years, approximately 80% of kindergarten students were registered for an all-day kindergarten program. To fully understand the impact offering all-day kindergarten without a fee would have going forward, we need to review the class size guidelines. In the 1920 school year, kindergarten class size allowed for 27 students before the district would cap and send to a partner school. The school board reduced the class size guidelines for kindergarten from 27 to 25, beginning with this school year. With a cap of 25 students at the kindergarten level, we would need, if you want to go to the far right column, 32 all-day kindergarten sections for the 21-22 school year. These section numbers are based on all kindergarten students in our midpoints projections attending all-day kindergarten. We recognize half-day kindergarten will continue to be an option for some of our families. Based on previous year's trends, 16 to 20% of families select the half-day program. Therefore, we are planning at this time for 2 FTEs or 4 classes of half-day program. Depending on the number of families who choose half-day kindergarten at each school, our current ADK projections could be reduced. As a reminder for the 21-22, these numbers are projections. We will continue to register new kindergarten students through the summer and will not know the actual number of sections needed until later, which is the case every year. As of this afternoon, though, we have 483 all-day kindergarten and 85 half-day kindergarten. Based on previous years, we are on track to hit our midpoint projections. And just as a reminder, this year you'll notice in the middle column, we have 49 half-day kindergarten classes. These are both in-person and remote classes, and we only offer half-day kindergarten this year. I can't even lift my finger to turn page. With the assistance of Dr. Chapman, we were able to provide information from other districts that are offering all-day kindergarten and the assignment of fees. Of 13 districts offering all-day kindergarten, 61.5 are offering it without an additional fee. It would be 57.1 if we include St. Charles. We have also included the percentage for each district of low income. So for example, Barrington does charge a fee and their low income is 18.9. And if you want to go down, so the white ones are the ones that do charge a fee. The blue do not charge a fee. And then St. Charles is in the tan colored. So what would be the impact of eliminating the ADK fee of the $2,025 a year? It would have a budget impact of approximately $1.2 million annually. It would also ensure all students have equitable access to all-day kindergarten, allowing for the potential of accelerating both academic and SEL learning for all students. So some considerations that this board may want to take before we move forward. We need to consider the reoccurring cost of $1.2 million, which will impact future budgets. Also, eliminating the fee reduces funds available for other district priorities. Even with a no-fee all-day kindergarten, we will still need to offer a half-day kindergarten program for families that would want that choice. And we do not know what the enrollment would be for both all-day kindergarten and half-day kindergarten. And then also moving into the 21-22 school year, we do not know at this time what guidelines will be in place and what additional costs might be accrued due to COVID-19. So in summary, the presentation was really provided tonight to answer the question of the financial cost of eliminating the all-day kindergarten fee. If the board may have additional questions that they would like us to answer about all-day kindergarten as it refers to academics and SEL, such as what is the data that shows the effectiveness of all-day kindergarten from both the academic and social emotional learning, from both research and our district data. It has been suggested that maybe we survey families in the past to see if the cost of the all-day kindergarten program was a reason for choosing the half-day option. But we also know that you as a board may have other questions you would like us to research. And then, so what we're also asking tonight, is there a timeline that you would like us to find out the answers and move forward?
Well, I can say, originally this was on L&T's agenda. It was determined that last spring that wasn't the correct year to really discuss all-day kindergarten because the uncertainty going into this school year that we were pretty sure that we would have. So I'm not sure how it jumped off of L&T's agenda and hopped on to business services. So that's one piece. The other piece is I feel like we're missing information that maybe this is a second step to discuss once some of those items at the end on the summary, date of effectiveness, what's gained, what benefits do we have for the programming piece, and determine if that's enough to go forward to really talk about the financial aspect of it. So I feel like that's first and foremost. I think those two pieces I'd like to kind of get sorted out. But the other thing is that I know given, the financial consideration, I think, all-day kindergarten is part of, I'm looking at Naperville here, and they offer all-day kindergarten at no cost. And I'm not seeing some of the highest performing districts on here. I'm seeing, some of the neighboring districts. But I would really like to also see what are our highest performing districts offering and what percentage of those highest performing districts in this state are offering free all-day kindergarten. That's it.
So I'm going to echo actually many of the same questions. I'd like to see the data, and this is something that I think probably should come back through L&T. I certainly understand that when we're talking about the financial impact of something, why it might go through business services, but now that we're going to be talking about all these other questions are related to the academics, I think the appropriate place for that discussion would be L&T. I would like to know what data, because if we can show that we're closing gaps and we're fixing some of the issues that we might have, and show that there's data that behind this in other districts, I think it's money generally, it's money well spent if we're actually doing what this district is in the position to do and what we're here to do, which is improve academic performance. That's the business we're in, and that's what we should be doing. So that data is critical for me to understand and to know what my level of support would be for this.
I have a technical question about the percentage of participants in all-day kindergarten today who qualify for a fee waiver. You talked about the fee waiver. I'd like to understand how many of the participants actually qualify for that waiver as a percentage of the total all-day kindergarten population. That is both a budgetary question, but primarily I think about it as an effectiveness question. If there are folks who qualify for a waiver, but the waiver process prohibits them from selecting all-day kindergarten when they might otherwise, I'd like to really try to dig deep into understanding that. I think Mr. McNally's onto the right point here. This is money well spent if it's spent to drive academic progress. And in that regard, I'd like to see us focus those questions around the differences in the percent of enrollment associated with English language learners versus non-English language learners in all-day kindergarten, and to better understand of the 16 to 20% who select half-day kindergarten, what are the inhibitors? If our philosophy is that more time in the classroom is better and drives positive impacts, then I'd like to really understand why those parents who select half-day do so. And if it's a scheduling issue, that's one thing. If it's a lack of understanding of the potential positive outcomes, then perhaps what we might want to consider is, in addition to changes associated with the budget dollars, changes in the way that we promote and talk about all-day kindergarten and its benefits at the time of enrollment.
I asked a few questions ahead of time with the vote that were all asked here in terms of why do people choose half day? Is it the tuition cost? I asked about poverty, free and reduced lunch. Mrs. Geyer said there are about 4 or 5 children who are in half day of all of our low-income kids. I guess I agree it's always good to have the data. I'm a big data person myself. And maybe because I'm an early childhood educator, it feels weird to me, let's see if I can articulate it, that having kids in school longer would be questioned and that we charge for it. So after a year like this, where people have been yelling at us, get our kids into school, it seems odd now that we would want to know whether we should have our kids full day. And the commentary we got before the meeting started, the same thing, our kids need to be social. So I'm inclined that $1 million is hard to say out loud, but I'm inclined to think that this is very much worth going forward with. The data will be good. We know the research has been long-standing that early childhood education is important for success for kids. And I think I think the state is awfully nice to allow families the choice that they're not required to be in all day. So it's a little confusing to me as to why we're having to have the data to make the financial decision. The data is good for us to have anyway, to be sure that we are closing gaps. So at this point right now, I have been for all-day kindergarten for a very long time and think $1 million is worth it.
So
I would agree with you, Mrs. McCabe, on that point. I think the one thing in hearing all our colleagues is talking about the information about, in hindsight, would you have gone all day? And so I think it's really important to make sure we survey our first graders. So when we're talking about surveying, I want to make sure we're surveying the first grade class, and that if you had the opportunity to have an all-day kindergarten that was no fees, would you have gone? And if so, what was the inhibitor that you didn't do it? And I think that's where we get the information in regards to the cost. I'm with Mrs. McCabe in the sense that this is something that we have been talking about and looking at for several years. And I think there are some families that, almost like what we've seen today, for their family it works half day, but many families would want to go full day if they could. So I think having that opportunity for choice is something I think I'd like to see us offer.
And do know that's the group that we would survey, is the ones that have already gone. So it would actually be this year's first grade students.
Thank you.
I just wanted to real quick, I'll try to stay in my lane here in the financial side. The one issue here is if it's not, and you articulated this in this case, so I'm not trying to say you didn't, but if it was as simple as saying we can pay this money and we know we're going to get everybody in all-day kindergarten, it's a different conversation than you're investing the money and we don't know that, right? So it's not a one-to-one correlation in terms of the money invested and the people that are going to come back to it. And even there's limitations in the surveying because the behaviors of a parent a year or two ago are not necessarily, kind of like the stock market, it's not necessarily indicative of what will happen in the future. And I'll just give a personal example. I have 3 kids. 2 of my kids I put in all-day kindergarten, and 1 of them I never would have. So if I would answer the survey after the first one, it would have looked really good, but my second one just wasn't, that there was no way she was going to be able to handle it. And so that's the tricky part of this equation is the numbers do matter financially, but they don't tell the whole piece of the story, right? There's lots of different data points that have to be collected here.
As a point, I wanted to clarify, one of the comments at the end was by moving to something like this, we reduce fees. And then as a result, we have less revenue for other projects. So that, am I understanding that correctly? Then the 2025 that we're charging, that's not a one-for-one cost. Do you know what I'm saying? Do we have additional revenue as a result of
No.
that outside of the expenses of going to all-day kindergarten?
No, the revenue collected is intended to 100% offset the expenses
For kindergarten?
for kindergarten, for
Okay.
all-day kindergarten.
Okay.
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
I'll just jump in real quick too, because that was gonna be one of my comments. So historically, the board and administration has always adjusted the fees every year based on that. So it was never intended to be revenue producing, right? So it was a true one-to-one. So like I said, it's slightly adjusted here and there, but it's always been, we've never tried to have a surplus or anything in the 10 years that I've been on the board. So I just wanted to share that with the board, since it seems like this is gonna be a discussion that moves forward. And since I won't be here, I wanted to share that information because it is important to know as you guys talk about things. I agree with everybody about the data and everything, but it is as the financial part. So that's why I wanted to jump in real quick on that one. So
Thank you. The other question that I had was related to the bilingual students. And I would like to know, as part of the data that's shared back, is what the percentage of bilingual students that we've had historically, and how are we supporting them so that they have a successful transition in kindergarten to first grade?
So our bilingual classrooms, our students that go into a Spanish speaking, half Spanish and half, they have a full day option for all of our bilingual. So I think you're also referencing our EL students, our students that may not be in the bilingual program. And so we are looking at their data separately. We will bring that back. In the 1920, I have to kind of remember what this year is so different. The 1920 school year, there were a total of 6 students that were EL that were in the half-day program. Everyone else, we had with the EL, they either went into the all-day kindergarten program, or maybe through, if they were at a title school, we may have chosen to put them in, or we just looked at what they were and we moved them in. So we ended up with there were 6 children that did not go into all-day kindergarten that had EL. What we don't know is the reason why they stayed in EL. Was it a parent choice? So that's why we're looking at the data for those children also.
Okay.
Mr. Lagner had a comment question.
Yeah, there are at least 3 different groups of parents here involved in those who accept and pay the fee or participate in all-day kindergarten. There are those who get waivers. There are those who pay willingly and have the means to pay. And then there's another group that really select the benefit and have a budgetary burden that they bear in order to make that sacrifice. And one of the challenges when we start to talk about revenue offsets, certainly it's clear that the current tuition rate offsets the total cost of the all-day kindergarten program. Some folks have the ability to pay that quite easily, other folks not quite so easily. And one of the challenges I think that we have to think about is when we move the program in a binary way from either you pay or you don't pay, it does eliminate the bucket of revenue that comes from those families here in St. Charles who have selected to participate and have the means to pay. And it will thereby decrease the flexibility we have in the other parts of the budget. So when we talk about the interplay between the academic performance and the budget, we have to consider each of those 3 groups. And one of the things for us to consider is that those folks who are willing to pay and have the means to pay and really don't feel that budget burden, they pay readily. And it does allow us flexibility for other parts of the program. So let's think about that interplay, because we all, it seems at the board table, agree that all-day kindergarten is a good thing. The question is whether or not we want to remove flexibility, particularly from that group who has the willingness to pay. The other thing I would say is that may or may not be true for that 16 or 20% of the population that selects half-day. And if we saw that it's clustered in those first two groups of people who would either get a waiver or really feel that budget burden, or feel that tuition creates a budget burden for their family, I hope that we can think of creative ways to help that group and decouple the binary nature of this, and see if there's another way for us to get after this to keep the maximum financial flexibility while drawing in the most people into the all-day kindergarten program.
I do think there's, I'm sorry,
go ahead.
Mr. Go ahead.
I really, just to kind of jump onto that point, that was one of the things that I was considering. Well, two things. When Dr. Chapman was speaking, I know that half-day is, for many, it's not a financial choice at all. It's just a social choice. I know my child, and I know that perhaps for the child's social emotional learning, home is the best place for them for that half day. But as far, I had the same concern regarding that large budget impact, and I'm wondering if, and it's, just kind of off the top of my head, if maybe just making the waiver process more flexible might be the way to go, as opposed to fully funding. But again, I will reiterate that I don't think that this is I think this is money well spent if this has data behind it showing that we are going to be improving moving the academic needle for students. That's what we're here to do.
I'm going to say that, Mr. Lechner, you identified a couple of groups, 3 groups, but I do think there's another group that has to make either a decision to pay for all-day kindergarten and not pay for something else that may be significant to them. And additionally, there's other parents that may decide not to send their kids to all-day kindergarten because of the cost, but then maybe, might say, oh, it's for this other reason. I actually know 4 families who, just myself, who did not choose all-day kindergarten because of the cost, who had means maybe to pay for a different child. 2 of them happened to have multiples, and there is no cost offset. It's only, you can keep paying past kindergarten, which is still paying. And then another family happened to be a parent whose financial means weren't there to get a waiver, but it still just they weren't able to make that happen. And so I do think that there are some people who make choices, but they're not choices because they would have made different choices had this been available for their children because it's what they desired. So I do think that's another group. I did hear, I do agree that this would lessen flex, although I think I also heard we might, not have room for other higher priorities. I certainly think the education of our youngest students should be one of the highest priorities we do have. So that's the final thing I want to say about all-day kindergarten today, I guess.
I would suggest wherever we land, if we land that we don't want to do the $1.1 or $2 million, that we lower the tuition cost. And we begin to see what impact that really has on our budget and our program. I think the district did do all-day kindergarten because of the strategic summits that we had. The community wanted it, and we couldn't afford it at the time. And it has been part of our, I think the previous boards have all looked to see how can we lower the cost. I think the business office has done an outstanding job of making sure that the funds that come in go to all-day kindergarten. That has been a really good, whatever the right word be, firewall of protecting that money. So maybe we would be at a place where we can start to look at lowering that cost. I think if we were charging every grade level a $22,000. We would hear about this more often, but when your child comes for 1 year, you figure out how to make that decision, you move on, and then it doesn't become an issue anymore. But I think to everyone's point, making sure we're closing gaps and giving our kids the kind of educational situation I think we have here with our kindergarten is really critical. So I would suggest that maybe another option would be to how can we, because I think we're going to be talking about that in the next item is fees, and maybe that's an area we could at least address for upcoming year.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to the reason why we brought this to the Business Services Committee. We're at some really important decision-making time in our timeline related to the budget and also in our facility planning. As you know, we have a facility master plan group that's working right now, and there are facility implications for moving to all-day kindergarten. As we increase the number of sections of all-day kindergarten, we also increase the number of classroom sections. So we wanted to have this preliminary conversation with you to understand if this was still a priority for the board, and we also wanted to have an opportunity to bring you back the information and data that you wanted to have to make a decision. I think it starts at a discussion about, what are our core beliefs about early learning, and I think that that's something that we can share with you some data and research around that particular topic. But then you also unpack some of the complexities of this decision. And I really appreciate the discussion about the various kind of financial situations and scenarios that families are facing as they try to balance and make this determination. So we needed to know now, as opposed to at an April Learning and Teaching meeting, if this was something you wanted us to be considering in the planning process. Because it does, again, have some budget implications, but it also has some facility implications. I can also say that, this is my 11th year in the district, and we've talked about this for a long time. This has been something that's been very important. But we are at a point in declining enrollment and our kind of current staffing levels that it's almost at an intersection where the trade-off is within 1 or 2 classrooms and 1 or 2 staff members. And so we can bring you that data back and show you kind of what that impact is, because we are at a place where it's feasible, given some of those other constraints that in a different year and a different situation might be more challenging to try to accomplish, given the enrollment and facility needs.
Dr. Pearson, does that 1.2 million that we saw reflected include potential facilities costs, or is?
No, it does not.
No. And then just a second question for us for flexibility's sake, and this will be an unpopular question, but we'll have to ask it. Do we know of other districts who have unpaid or require no tuition for all-day kindergarten who have ever gone back to requiring tuition? And how has that gone?
Yeah, it's a great question, and that's one of the things we talked about. Is I don't know of any, and I don't know how that would work, right? How do you kind of take that back, which is kind of the issue. And to Mrs. McCabe's point, we have modeled some fee reductions, and I don't know that we want to necessarily talk about it now. We can talk about the next item, but one of the things that we've haven't done in this district is free hasn't meant free. And so that's one thing we could absolutely do. We can certainly do a reduction on the paid at a lesser cost for a year and monitor that and see where that goes. So that's an option. And Mr. Leitner, to your question earlier about the waiver process, you as a board can direct us to do a different waiver process for all-day kindergarten than we do for our other fees. When we made the change this past year to require income verification on our school fee waivers instead of following the free and reduced lunch process, which could easily be a deterrent for some, you as a board could direct us to do something differently in that area as well. So those are all kind of tools in your chest here to think about, as an interim step.
So just to summarize, what I heard collectively from the board is there is definitely interest in continuing the discussion related to all-day kindergarten. From a timeline standpoint, I mean, Dr. Pearson, I hear the sense of urgency. So does the April learning and teaching make sense, or what timeframe?
Yeah, that we would like to come back to learning and teaching in April with some of this additional information.
Okay. Perfect. And I'm assuming you guys will have capacity in the agenda.
We would certainly make room for an important item, certainly if there's urgency.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next item is school fees for fiscal year 21-22.
Yeah, first, a big thank you to Wendy Sedgwick and to the team. We met virtually to discuss this. It was a very unique year because we really were looking at not increasing any fees. You can see at the second, I don't know how it's structured, second, third page at the bottom. No adjustments to elementary fees, no adjustments to middle school fees. We eliminated accounting 1 and 2 course fees because we have coverage in the Perkins grant to cover those. And there will be a slight increase to yearbook fees simply just to cover the cost of the yearbook. So this is what the committee discussed and is recommending. Certainly, if we want to have a further conversation all-day kindergarten, we can do that as part of this process.
That's what I was going to suggest. Is it possible if we pull all day kindergarten out of the fee discussion for the general meeting so we can consent everything else and then bring that to the April meeting in case we can't come to a consensus on what we want to do with all day kindergarten, we can leave it on the table for discussion of reducing fees.
Sure, you could do that, or you can move forward, and you always have the right to amend your fee structure. Obviously, you should amend down then up for you, but it's whichever you prefer.
How does everyone feel about that?
I was actually just going to suggest just what Dr. Chapman suggested, that for right now, we move along as we have been because we know that it's a workable solution. But knowing that we may a week later have a discussion that changes those fee structures. So I would think it would be most financially prudent to include that in there for right now.
And just to follow up to that, our fees this year will not be assessed to the families until July 1st.
That's correct, and that is a change in timing, so we do have time.
What were you going to say, Mr. Manhan?
Yeah, I'm just going to agree with Mr. McNally, as we've done in multiple years where we amend the budget. So I think it's very easy for us just to approve it. Let's make sure that families can start to plan for that, and then if we decide to make adjustments, then that's even better, but at least they can start to plan for that if people need to. So I think we do that, and then that'd be my recommendation, then amend at a future date.
Okay. With the intention of a very robust discussion in April.
Okay, any other comments?
I just have a question. The 10% discount, does that happen?
Yes, if paid in full, it's the early bird, so paid between July 1 and this shall be end of July, is that right, Wendy? Then there'd be a 10% reduction.
Okay. And so when a family registers, that is something that they get to know?
Yes, and that was done, the purpose behind that was to not have to continually kind of
Yes, right.
follow up. It took a lot of staff time, and we've made strides in automating it. It used to be a very manual process.
Yes,
so.
I do remember that. And I do want to say that our principals have been outstanding at helping families who get behind, and they work really hard to support families as they go through that kind of work. I just wondered if there really was if people were taking advantage of the 10% discount. Thanks.
So I'll repeat that. It's 50% is what Ms. Sedgwick said. 50% take advantage of the all-day kindergarten early bird. So.
Do you have a percentage for the rest of the 1 through 12 for early bird or no? Just curious. It's a lot. I know. I do. Okay.
So the one other thing regarding then, with, as far as what you might call lost revenue by the 10% discount is probably, I'm going to say, partly offset by reduced fee, or reduced cost internally, and partly reduced, I think it's better to have that money sitting in one of our accounts collecting, not a, maybe a lot of interest, but if it's, if you have a significant amount of money, I think there's probably, we're probably not losing a full 10%, is I guess what I'm saying on that.
Yeah, that is correct. And to your point, I mean, before we instituted that, and I give a lot of credit to our team, I want to say we've cut our collections process, the amount outstanding collectibles down by 20 to 30%. By the time we get to the middle of the year, we've collected the vast majority of our fees, and obviously it's not pleasant for our staff to make the calls. It's not pleasant for parents to receive them. So it's been a really good thing.
Okay, so this would be consent for the next board meeting. And then item 4J, the review of bids. Mr. Baird.
Good evening, Ms. Fairgrave and Board of Education, Dr. Pearson, Dr. Chapman. I'm very happy to say that the process that we participated in with Wold Architects, we went out, we actually had 9 different groups come and walk the building with me after hours one night after they did their COVID testing, as far as the fill out sheet and going through the process. And we did have 6 bids come in. The bids came underneath for the construction costs, and they include both of the alternates, which included epoxying the floor in that one room, and then meeting all the needs for us to be able to harden that vestibule just like we do at every other school. So to be able to have the buzz-in operations. And I'm here to ask if we can go ahead and move forward. Light Construction had outstanding references. We've worked with them before with the addition over at East High School, and we would like to move forward with this project.
Any questions? Okay, this would be on for consent. Can you do you have any update on the architect RFQ?
We do right now. As of right now, we're going to be reviewing. We had submissions that were put in on Friday afternoon. We're going through all of them, dialing down, going through every single aspect that was requested in the RFQ, and then we'll be bringing that forward. And then our expectation is to have interviews after spring break, the week of April 8th, right in there.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
and very excited to tell you, Mr. Fairgrave, there were 15 submissions. 21 people contacted us, but we had 15 submissions, so we're pretty excited about that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and then next we have item 4K, the facility master plan update. Mr. Wolf.
Good evening, everybody. Just going to give a quick update tonight. Last week, Mrs. Smith and our team facilitated a hybrid version of our meeting, so we had live attendees as well as virtual attendees. We really focused on exploring the options that the committee had put together the prior meeting, and then started weighing the advantages and maybe some of the shortcomings of those options, and then blending ideas so we could get down to a more finite group of solutions that we can take a little deeper dive into. We did add 2 meetings in April and 2 meetings in May, with the expectation that we'll bring a recommendation back to the June 14th board meeting. I think that really gave some breathing room to the process and allowed some of the complexity and some of the ideas that are being forwarded by this committee to really have a chance to be developed and explored. So we will be on track here for the next 2 months, continuing to meet with that group and open for questions.
I attended and I was unable to attend in person, so I did the hybrid. I can say in person is a little easier because you, for sure. The discussion was really outstanding. The committee members are asking great questions. I appreciate the work that your team and Mrs. Smith did to be sure all voices were heard. They are coming to some very difficult pieces, and I appreciate very much that they are examining it from many different angles, so that when they bring to us their report, I think I'm sure we will have a robust conversation as well. But I really believe they will come having looked at the items pretty significantly. We had talked earlier that this process could take longer than April. And the committee has agreed that that was needed, just to be sure that the community realizes that the board doesn't have an agenda as to what we want and expect. We are really open to what they bring to us. And even if it comes in June, we will still have more conversation. We will not be voting at the June meeting about the facilities report. I think there was some concern that we already know what we want to do, but I'm very impressed with the process that you have put together. I'm very impressed with our CAC and facilities people. I think you will be satisfied for sure at what they bring to us. So, thank you.
Thank you for that additional context, Mrs. McCabe. Any other comments?
Mr. Critic, could you just roll us through a little bit? You said 2 more months, so can you walk us through a little bit more of your timeline kind of broken out?
Sure.
Sorry, I know this is arduous every single meeting.
No, it's fine. Because we added some time here, it makes sense to give you a little bit of agenda going forward. So the next meeting, there was a lot of different ideas on the table at the last meeting, and we wanted to explore what those disadvantages and advantages of each of those concepts might be, and then start to blend them or merge them. Some dealt with at the elementary level, some dealt at the high school level. So that merging happened mostly at that meeting, but we're going to play that back to the group at the next meeting. We're also taking a little deeper dive. They asked some great questions. So the next meeting, we'd like to spend a little time just giving also a kind of a overview of district finance. I think many of the CAC members heard it, but some of our other members that are part of this group are not familiar with how money is spent in the district. So I think that gives them some context, because as we go forward, certainly they're going to want to know some cost or range comparisons of options, so they have a better feel of kind of the whole, what are we talking about here? I think they need that, some value put to these options to be able to talk about them from a timing standpoint, urgency, and recommendation standpoint. So the second meeting in April, will be bringing back some of the concept costing, and then look at May as more of a, just kind of put a ribbon around things and make sure we're getting down to 1, 2, 3 options, or whatever that committee feels is worth bringing to the board as a whole.
Thank you.
Very welcome.
Good questions, comments? Thank you, Mr. Critta with Bold Architects. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I think next we move to citizens' comments. There were none. Okay, thank you, Mrs. Smith. So with that, future agenda items, really the biggest item, as we talked about earlier, is I believe we'll start to work on the budgeting, continuing to work on the budgeting process. That's coming up in May, right, for the initial forecast. A couple other items to highlight. Our next meeting is April 26th. And then there's also a reschedule for the May Business Services meeting to May 27th, given that we have high school graduation on the original date of May 24th. So just so you can add that to your calendars. And do you have anything else?
I do not. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So at 6:54 p.m., Business Services Committee is adjourned.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our special board meeting on March 22nd at 6:56 PM. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Ms. Marson, will you call the roll, please?
Here.
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 Here. Thank you. Will you all please rise for the pledge? All right. We are not doing closed session tonight, so that will take us to our 4 action items. That's number 5. Do I have a motion to approve the settlement agreement with parents and students to compromise disputed personal injury and other legal claims in exchange for $50,000?
So moved.
Mrs. McCabe
Second.
and Mrs. Barker. We'll take roll.
Yes.
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 Yes, motion passes. All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. McNally, then Ms. Mywell. Ms. Archstein, whenever you're ready.
Yes.
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 Yes, we are adjourned at 6:58 PM.